The history you know is only half the truth. They told you the First World War was fought in trenches and across battlefields. But they didn't tell you about the other war. The one waged in back alleys and candlelit rooms, where coins and whispers changed hands under the shadow of death, where nurses, madams, smugglers, and soldiers traded comfort, medicine, and secrets in a parallel world the official histories barely mention. This is the story of black markets and tolerated zones, coded letters and stolen identities. The war behind the war. Stay with me until the end. Because once you see this side of history, you can never see the First World War the same way again. The November night clings to your skin, damp and cold. The distant guns thud like a neighbor banging on the ceiling, but here, in the trenches, other rhythms beat. Coins changing hands, boots shifting in the dark. Behind a row of sandbags, two privates exchange a scrap of paper scrawled with an address in violet ink. It's your first glimpse into a parallel world, a black market pulsing just beneath the army's official supply chain. The brass pride themselves on logistics. Rifles tallied, beans weighed. But here, trade moves in whispers, favors, and flesh. A century later, history books gloss over this buzzing hive, preferring tales of valor. But tonight, the yeast scent of illicit bread ovens and muffled giggles from dugout alcoves remind you, survival here is as much about cunning as courage. By early 1915, the British Expeditionary Force officially banned brothels near the front, fearing disease would outpace bullets. On paper, it looked decisive. On the ground, the trade simply shifted further down the road, where khaki coats still queued in the rain. A corporal jokes his paybook is lighter than a politician's promise. His friend replies that at least promises don't require mercury shots afterward. The men laugh, though the humor dies quickly in the damp air. Under torchlight, a card game decides who gets first leave into a nearby town, code for cramped rooms scented with rose water and anxiety. Some officers secretly tolerate it, believing a night's comfort can muffle the relentless drum of shells. Official memos thunder about moral contagion, but the trench whispers say otherwise. You stumble upon a black market ledger scribbled on cigarette papers. Half hour, 2 francs. Full hour, 4. A pillow included, if you aren't picky. Someone doodled a smiling helmet, absurd enough to make even a modern emoji blush. One day, this ledger will hide inside a chaplain's Bible, only to baffle an auctioneer decades later. A medical orderly nearby unpacks bottles stamped Neo Salvasan, a German-made magic bullet against syphilis, now used by the Allies. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The enemy's labs cure the very soldiers they're trying to kill. A chalk arrow points toward Levage d'Interne Rouge, a code name redrawn nightly after military police erase it, a silent tug-of-war in white dust. Rain mists down as you imagine a young woman pacing an attic above a shuttered bakery, counting heartbeats until her next client climbs the stairs. She dreams of Paris, or maybe just a warm bath. Surgeons dream of better testing kits. For now, a lamp, a glance, and a prayer are all they have. Past midnight, the line of men outside a village brothel endures drizzle and doubt. Some fear disease. Others fear being seen. All fear returning to the front. Transactions are quick, fevered, and come with stamped cards declaring examined and found clean, though the ink often smears before morning. 4:15 minutes. Artillery timetables vanish. You move on, boots sticky with secrets, toward a brazier glowing like a tired ember. Someone hands you condensed milk. You taste sweetness, innocence, and complicity in the same spoonful. War has many currencies: comfort, hope, and the ability to pretend something never happened. Inside a smoky cafe, mismatched tables wobble under the elbows of men who just want to forget their rank. Madame Colette glides out, pearls clinking like rain, offering a menu that lists coffee, cake, and hours with women whose names read like stolen novels. Officially, by 1914, over 1,000 registered brothels in Paris underwent monthly inspections. In practice, it pushed many into unregistered corners where inspectors never came. You take your stamped ticket into a corridor lit by wire-caged lanterns. The scent of patchouli and lavender greets you in a small room. A woman in a faded emerald gown offers you a cigarette. Rumors say some lace tobacco with opium to calm nerves. On the table, jars of antiseptic lotions sit beside syringes. Gossip claims some of these women are couriers, smuggling letters and maps under silk bodices. In the corner, a gramophone plays a warbled cabaret tune. Around you, soldiers swap gossip. Safe houses, neighborhoods to avoid, coded handkerchief signals tied to lampposts. A well-dressed man pockets a sugar cube with a code scrawled in icing, destined to dissolve before any censor can read it. The night wears on, and you leave with coffee-stained tickets and the echo of hushed laughter. Outside, the Paris sky is smeared with searchlights. The warmth in your chest lingers, but so does the weight of knowing this was just one night in a war fought on many fronts, some never recorded in any official history. You step from the muddy lane into a low-ceilinged hut warmed by a single lantern balanced on a rickety barrel. Rows of paybooks and neatly folded notes wait for distribution. A sergeant with tired eyes calls your name in a voice that almost sounds sympathetic. 8 crisp shillings slide into your hand, barely enough for bread, but heavy enough to promise a few hours of escape. You tuck the paybook close, the ink still damp, and head toward a cluster of shuttered buildings known among the men as the Velvet District. Here, doors are draped in curtains instead of iron bars, and smoke curls around your collar as you step inside. At a polished oak table, the madam flips through her ledger. She smiles, slips a small key engraved with a bird into your palm. Privacy, you think, can be bought. The corridor smells faintly of rose water and stale tobacco. Your room is lined with faded tapestries and a chipped table holding a menu of services printed in both French and English. Rumor has it some women trade time for silk ribbons or cigarette stubs when coins run low. Tonight, you offer matchboxes, and she accepts with a laugh that softens the candlelight. A gramophone plays a scratchy tango as tea and sugared almonds arrive on a small tray. For a moment, you forget the smell of mud and gunpowder. You talk quietly about Lancashire, music halls, biscuits that taste older than the war. Historians will argue forever whether men came here for relief from poverty or loneliness. But here, you don't care about categories. A shilling buys both warmth and surrender. Outside, damp air wraps around you as you slip back toward camp, the cold metal of the key still warm from your grip. Near the compound's edge, a black market dealer offers you a ration ticket for 2 cigarettes. You shake your head, smiling at the absurdity, trading sleep for smoke. A flare bursts overhead, lighting puddles under your boots. You hurry toward the trenches, imagining stale biscuits waiting in the dugout. Your lantern guttering, you lie down beside a comrade who salutes you with a half-smile, as if honoring small mercies. Morning comes in the form of a corrugated iron hut stamped, Station Sanitaire Mobile. Inside, carbolic soap and chalk dust sting your nose. Nurses bustle with trays of needles and bottles labeled Neo-Salvarsan, the so-called magic bullet against syphilis. The irony stings. Allied doctors using German medicine to save men from their own nights off. The French deployed more than 40 mobile clinics by 1916, and the British soon followed. You take your place on a wooden bench, the air thick with shame and disinfectant. A sapper mutters that cocaine patches would make injections easier. You laugh at the thought of soldiers sprinting through dreams of unicorns. Official policy forbids sick leave for venereal disease, lest it encourage risky behavior. Instead, you receive a card stamped, fit for light duty only. Behind a sandbag wall, chalk arrows mark the way to tolerated districts, erased each morning by the police, redrawn each night. The sun sets, and you follow the arrows again, into the kind of night history rarely records. Behind every coin traded is a calculation: risk, comfort, survival. And here, in the quiet between shells, men will take whatever comfort they can, even if it disappears by dawn. A lantern swings above a lacquered mahogany desk as you step inside Madame Rousseau's establishment. The plaster on the walls may be crumbling, but her posture is regal, her smile as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. She greets each man by rank, eyes scanning paybooks and pockets with quiet calculation. By late 1917, the British War Office required brothels serving soldiers to register with military authorities, submitting to monthly inspections. It forged a strange alliance: madams and officers bound by paperwork and profit. Some units paid flat rates for exclusive access, a morale subscription, as Madame Rousseau calls it, her tone halfway between humor and business. A curtain parts, revealing piles of mattresses and gas masks repurposed as privacy screens. Nurses glide through with trays of antiseptic lotion, their presence a reminder that this business is both transaction and triage. A sign boasts health certificates from the Geneva Medical Board, stamped hastily but enough to soothe worried minds. In the parlor, shelves of brandy and leather-bound books frame a quiet conversation. A telegram marked "Urgent" disappears into Madame Rousseau's corset with a flick of her wrist. Rumor says she once intercepted an enemy communique hidden inside a phonograph shell. Whether it's truth or myth, no one dares ask. She pours you a glass of brandy, asking if you want discretion or novelty. You choose novelty. A redhead in a silk gown embroidered with poppies steps forward, a pouch at her waist bulging with keys and slips of paper. Bribes, messages, or both. Some women here are couriers, carrying microfilm in ribbon ties. It's dangerous work, but no riskier than loving a soldier. Outside, pigeons perch on the rooftop, cooing like spies. You imagine them as messengers faster than any courier on horseback. When you leave, the coins in your pocket jingle like a private chorus, a reminder that you've bought something both fleeting and unforgettable. The troop train platform smells of locomotive oil and wet wool. Under a chalk arrow pointing toward a back alley, a civilian clerk slips you a folded note, an address disguised as a train schedule. You descend into the station's hidden concourse, past mosaic tiles chipped by thousands of boots, into a vaulted chamber lit by red glass lanterns. Military authorities banned women from station platforms by mid-1915, but the rule was largely ignored. Here, numbered alcoves promise anonymity. Your hostess pours tea that steams like ghostly signals, her skirt embroidered with tiny train engines. She unbuttons your tunic with careful hands, speaking of lighthouses and seaside towns. Historians still debate whether these subterranean rendezvous were tolerated by railway officials or arranged by military intelligence to manage morale. Official memos deny it. Diaries suggest otherwise. When you leave, she gives you a handkerchief stamped with a local laundry mark, a souvenir of warmth in a cold season. Back on the train, the rhythm of the rails syncs with your heartbeat. Station lights fade behind you, replaced by memories of red lanterns and hushed laughter. Whatever waits at the front, you carry this moment like a folded ticket stub, safe in your breast pocket. You settle at a battered wooden desk in a dim writing room lit by oil lamps. Rain thrums against shattered windows while your pencil hovers over a sheet stamped with a censor's seal. Officially, every soldier's mail passes through the base post office, where clerks slice away anything hinting at troop movements, shortages, or morale. By 1916, British postal authorities were screening over 5 million letters per month, a paper wall between the front and home. You imagine your mother reading the same idyllic lines you wrote last week. unaware that you've been wounded for months. You choose your words carefully, replacing truth with safer lies. Rations described as hearty, the dawn sky rivaling any back-home sunrise. Some soldiers hide coded messages in flower names, Lily meaning a meeting on the 3rd, Rose for a cancelled outing. One corporal admits he nearly turned up at the wrong door after mixing them up. Your letter slips into a canvas pouch bound for destinations you'll never see. Around you, torn envelopes litter the floor, fragments of someone else's truth fluttering like wounded moths. A chalkboard in the courtyard lists mail routes, faded chalk marking morning drops to accompany, afternoons to be. Fringe stories claim some soldiers glued mirrors to pigeon whistles to flash secret signals when mail arrived, trying to outweak the sensors. The image of glittering pigeons bobbing over the trenches almost makes you laugh. Inside your greatcoat, you find scraps of half-finished letters from men who never returned, one ending mid-sentence, "I dream of home." The page is smeared, the thought forever incomplete. Later, you draft another letter, not to family, but to your commanding officer, praising rations and requesting light duty for minor fatigue. Whether it buys you days away from the front or not, you know hope is worth the ink. Rumor says some brothels offered letter forwarding services, slipping messages through false bottom trunks. Others rewrote abandoned love letters in delicate cursive, trading them for a night by the fire. By the time you hand your letter to the clerk, rain has eased into mist. You step outside, collar high, knowing that tonight you've bent the truth into a kind of shield. You turn down a narrow alley and walk straight into the glow of a sharp lantern beam. 3 women in starched white blouses stand in your path, hymn books tucked under their arms like shields. Their voices rise in harmony, verses aimed at the dangers of loose living. Beside them, a militia officer hands out pamphlets printed by the British War Office in April 1917, moral instruction woven tightly with warnings about disease. The crowd thickens as a temperance lecturer proclaims that every glass of spirits drained in carnal pursuit steals a drop of one's soul. Her words roll over the cobblestones like slow thunder. You notice a young soldier in the front row shift uncomfortably, breath curling in the cold air. Historians will argue forever whether such crusades curbed infection or simply drove the trade further underground. A rumor drifts through the gathering. Some moral campaigners masquerade as health inspectors, secretly keeping files on patrons to expose them to their regimental officers. You picture ledgers filled with names locked away in parish basements. Suddenly, a pair of military police march down the street, battering ram in hand. The door of a nearby salon bursts inward, rose water spilling into the night air along with shouts. A corporal emerges holding a stack of health certificates, waving them like trophies before tossing them into the mud. Moments later, a motor van emblazoned with "Public Health and Discipline" pulls up. A laboratory technician sets up a folding table with testing kits for gonorrhea and syphilis, bottles of disinfectant lined beside leaflets reading, "Trust science, trust virtue." A bystander mutters that vice will be hard to find when inspection lines stretch longer than the canteen queue. A local doctor arrives, carrying a microscope and a satchel. He unboxes a new shamrock green condom design from London, explaining its improved wiring with the flair of a salesman. The crowd leans in, some curious, others skeptical. Whether these devices reach the front lines or stay in drawers back home is anyone's guess. The drizzle becomes a spray, thinning the crowd. You slip into a nearby tent run by a civilian nurse. She checks your hands for infection while lecturing you on moral hygiene as if you were back in Sunday school. She pronounces you safe for another week, the words stranger than any lullaby. She gestures toward a ledger, asking for your name. You write one that's only half your own. Rumor has its soldiers swap names to dodge scorn or paperwork. You imagine meeting your own alias one day, sharing a drink in the quiet knowledge that neither of you are entirely real. You leave the tent and follow the sound of piano keys down the block. Ahead, a soldier carries a chalkboard sign. No hits, no misses, no regrets. A wink, an open door, and the night swallows you into warmth and noise, leaving the moralists behind in the rain. Moonlight filters through a slit in the canvas roof as you enter a dugout repurposed into a makeshift dispensary. The air smells of antiseptic and the faint sweetness of opium residue clinging to the wooden shelves. A corporal behind the counter spoons 2 sugar cubes soaked in liquid morphine from a clay jar. By mid-1917, British medical officers had recorded tens of thousands of morphine injections given near the front, part of a desperate push to dull pain as urgently as resupplying ammunition. Historians still argue whether the practice saved more lives than it cost in dependency and withdrawal. You place 1 sugar cube on your tongue. Warmth spreads through your limbs, your heartbeat slowing to a lull. A sergeant once bragged he could outrun any German patrol with morphine in his pocket, until he tripped over a duck. Fringe gossip claims some madams in Calais mix morphine into rosewater baths to coax soldiers into returning. The image is half fantasy, half warning. Satin gowns, steaming tubs, and a laughter that echoes like bells over tile. A nurse in a patched apron enters with a tray of syringes. Morphine mixed with cocaine, an experimental treatment for shell shock. Official records note that by 1918, these cocktails were used to stabilize men before evacuation. You watch her inject a pale, trembling soldier. His breathing evens, his eyes close. A lieutenant once complained that morphine fog turned his trench maps into Rorschach tests. At least, he joked, it was a new way to see the enemy. Ledger books track every dose. The ink as permanent as the longing for another hit. Rumors say some soldiers trade paybook entries for extra morphine rations. You recall the day you swapped 3 days' wages for a single ampoule of ether spray. Proof that survival has strange currencies. You pocket a dog-eared pamphlet titled Notes on Analgesia in the Field, its margins filled with scrawled soldier notes. Dream vivid, sleep 9 hours. Nightmares worse first week. You imagine morphine-fueled poetry readings by candlelight, audiences nodding in hazy approval. When the corporal rings the bell for closing, you step into the cold air. Stars blink through patchy clouds as you consider turning back for 1 more cube. Instead, you head toward the dugout, letting the drug's soft echo cushion you from the ache in your side. At the entrance, fellow soldiers glance at you in passing lamplight. Some nod in recognition, others see only another shadow in the trenches. You lean against a wooden beam, eyes closed, and let exhaustion take you. Tomorrow you'll weigh the choice again. Comfort or clarity, relief or return. A canvas tent marked regimental records looms ahead, the smell of ink mixing with damp canvas. Inside, a clerk in spectacles taps a ledger with 1 finger and asks for your name and number. You hesitate, then give him an alias clipped from a country parish. Thomas Hartley. Since 1916, regulations have required soldiers to wear identity discs stamped with their real details to speed identification of casualties. But for arrests or medical records involving venereal disease, aliases are common, shields for family honor, and obstacles for future historians trying to piece together the truth. On the table lies a battered pocket Bible with penciled names on the flyleaf. Rumor has it soldiers passed these Bibles around to legitimize chosen identities. One man inscribed Edward Murray, only to later meet the real Edward Murray from down the road. The thought makes you smirk at the idea of 2 strangers shaking hands over the same borrowed name. The clerk hands you a medical treatment form. You write your alias again. He notices, but says nothing. Some nights, any name that fills a line is good enough. Later, in the dugout, you slip a folded scrap of paper to a female attendant you've bribed for extra dressings. On it, Lydia Spencer, her own alias. She writes Thomas Hartley on hers and returns it. Soldiers swap names like calling cards, hiding romances or debts in plain sight. A corporal boasts that his alias got him out of a disciplinary hearing. His paybook, stamped with another name, is a shield against consequences. Around the brazier, he quips that half the regiment thinks Thomas Hartley is the luckiest man alive. The men laugh and tap their helmets in mock salute to an invisible figure. Near the base of a guard tower, carved initials catch your eye: Bert Williams, Tommy Wilson, and Edith Green. You run your fingers over them, wondering if Edith carved her name herself before slipping back to civilian life. It feels like a secret handshake across time. By nightfall, your alias forms are sealed in an envelope marked confidential and filed away by an orderly. You wonder if they'll survive the war or vanish in a flooded archive. Historians will later argue whether the use of pseudonyms blurred truth and fiction so thoroughly that no accurate roster of World War I soldiers will ever exist. For now, you sleep under a borrowed name, cocooned in the strange comfort of identities both borrowed and betrayed. Cold rain drums on the corrugated roof of the quarantine barracks as you step inside. The air is thick with damp wool, disinfectant, and the faint metallic tang of iodine. Rows of iron cots stretch along the walls, each covered in rough army blankets tucked with regulation precision. A corporal with a clipboard waves you toward an empty bed near the far wall. The barracks exists for one purpose: keeping suspected infections from spreading until the medics can confirm who's clean. In 1917, British Army orders dictated a minimum 5-day confinement for anyone suspected of carrying venereal disease. Some men say those 5 days feel longer than a month. On the bedside table, a brown glass bottle marked Condy's fluid gives off a sting sharp enough to make your eyes water. Across the room, a soldier fiddles with his identity disc, muttering that he's memorized every crack in the ceiling. You catch yourself thinking that might be the Army's unofficial cure, counting cracks until the boredom kills the urge for anything else. A nurse in a faded apron hands out towels and bars of hard soap, ordering everyone to be ready for inspection. Behind the curtain at the far end, a medical officer swabs your throat and groin, sealing the samples in small jars. The process is over in 2 minutes, but feels like confessing sins you never meant to write down. On your way back to the cot, you notice the shelf of worn magazines, most with covers removed, replaced by plain brown paper. Rumor says the missing covers once showed women in poses deemed inappropriate, confiscated by the matron and likely tucked away in some orderly's private scrapbook. A bell rings for dinner: boiled potatoes and grey gravy ladled from an enamel bucket. Bread hard enough to double as a weapon. You mutter that it might have been baked during the last war, drawing a few tired laughs. Afterward, the corporal calls names for work detail: latrines, water hauling, wood chopping. You draw boiler duty, shoveling coal into the heater until sweat runs down your back. The warmth is almost a luxury compared to the barracks chill. When you return to your cot, a folded slip of paper lies on the blanket, the schedule for daily health lectures during confinement. Tomorrow's topic, the dangers of moral lapse, will be delivered by a chaplain. Historians will one day debate whether these talks changed anyone's behavior or just served as moral wallpaper over the same old walls. By lights out, the barracks is dark except for the dim glow of a lantern. A soldier nearby murmurs in his sleep about someone named Claire. Whether she's real or just a dream stitched together from longing, you can't tell. You smile at the absurdity of it all, imagining a recruitment poster reading: "Join the army, see the world from quarantine barracks." Then you close your eyes and let the slow drip of time mark your sentence here, waiting for a lab verdict that will decide if you walk free or wait longer. 2 days later, the corporal posts the test results on a board by the barracks door. Men crowd around, jostling for a glimpse of their fate. Some grin with relief, clutching their release slips like golden tickets. Others curse under their breath, ordered to remain for Further observation. Your name, your alias, appears under "cleared." You stuff the slip into your breast pocket before anyone can question the details. Outside, the rain has stopped, leaving puddles that mirror a pale winter sky. Instead of heading straight back to your unit, you follow a chalk arrow toward the tolerated zone, one of the Army's strange compromises. These districts are officially regulated, patrolled by military police, and inspected weekly, meant to offer safe relief while keeping vice contained. In reality, they operate like small, self-governed kingdoms. The first building you enter is a narrow cafe with lace curtains and walls painted a fading shade of crimson. A brass band recording plays on a gramophone in the corner. The madam greets you like an old friend, offering a seat at a small round table. On it sits a menu: coffee, wine, and a special hour listed at 5 francs. She speaks openly about the inspections, how military doctors arrive with clipboards, line up the women, and check health certificates stamped in triplicate. She says the soldiers prefer it here, where the rules are clear and the risk lower, even if the price is higher. Upstairs, the rooms are clean but sparse: iron beds, white sheets, and a faint scent of carbolic soap. On the nightstand, a tin ashtray sits beside a stack of clean towels and a small blue bottle labeled Lotio Mercurialis. You know what it's for. While you talk, the madam mentions that some of her girls act as informants for the military police, trading overheard details about deserters, stolen goods, and black market deals in exchange for protection. It's another reminder that in this war, every comfort comes with a hidden ledger. As you leave, a sergeant passes you on the stairs, his cap tilted low. You both pretend not to see each other. Outside, the tolerated zone bustles quietly. Shopkeepers selling cigarettes, tailors hemming trousers, children playing marbles in the street as if the front were 1,000 miles away. You light a cigarette and watch the smoke curl into the cold air. For a brief moment, the war feels far away, muted by the hum of a place built on compromise. Half morality, half survival. Then, in the distance, you hear the faint thud of artillery, and the illusion cracks like thin ice. The road back to camp winds through fields scarred by shell craters, each one half filled with rainwater that reflects the grey afternoon light. You pass a group of engineers repairing a collapsed footbridge. Their laughter carries over the mud, the kind of laughter that comes from knowing the work will be undone by the next storm or bombardment. At the checkpoint, a sentry inspects your pass and waves you through. His eyes linger for a moment, as if weighing whether to ask where you've been. He doesn't. In this war, silence is its own currency. By the time you reach the frontline support trench, dusk is settling. A cook ladles stew into your mess tin, thin, salty, but hot. You take a seat on an overturned crate beside a few familiar faces. No one speaks of the tolerated zone or the quarantine barracks. Instead, the conversation drifts to rumors about leave, promotions, and a shipment of boots that may or may not arrive before winter. Later, in the dugout, you unwrap the last of the sugar cubes from your pocket, unsoaked in anything stronger than memory. The gramophone sputters in the corner, playing a tinny waltz that almost drowns out the distant shell fire. Almost. In the lamplight, you take out your paybook, your real one this time, and trace your own name with a finger. For weeks, you've been living between truths and fictions, aliases, coded letters, whispered transactions, and half-official compromises. Somewhere in all of it is the war history we'll remember, but much of it will remain here, between the shadows and the mud. Outside, the night deepens. Patrols move quietly along the trench line, boots muffled by sandbags. You hear the soft thump of a flare gun and watch the sky bloom into a pale ghostlight that makes the world look both unreal and entirely too real. You think about the people who've crossed your path, madams with eyes like steel, nurses with hands steady as stone, dealers who can get you anything for the right price, and fellow soldiers whose names may never appear in any official ledger. This too is the war. Not just rifles and orders, but the daily, fragile bargains that keep men moving forward one day at a time. Before sleep, you pull your blanket tight and listen to the dugout's slow breathing. Tomorrow might bring another raid, another march, another letter home trimmed by sensors. Or it might bring nothing at all but the steady rhythm of surviving. Either way, you know that the war everyone talks about is only half the story. The other half lives here, in these unrecorded moments, half in the light, half in the dark, waiting for someone, someday, to tell it whole.